Hello and welcome back to my RC channel. I'm Andy RC and today I'm going to be taking a look at the SkyStars G730L 7-inch freestyle model. Now this one has come from GearBest. I believe it's also available from Banggood as well. And at the making of this video, the plug and fly version, which this one is, costs around about 157 GBP, but they also sell it as a kit which costs 150 GBP. So it's only saving 7 GBP going for the kit version, so for me it's a no-brainer to get the plug and fly version, and I think that's a very good price for the components that this thing has as well. So I'm seeing a trend in the hobby at the moment, and that is on the smaller end of the scale with the microcopters. They are getting smaller, and then at the larger end they're getting bigger, so we're now seeing 6, 7 and 8 inch copters. It makes me wonder how long it's going to be until we're back to the 450 size. And I was trying to figure out why that is, because I flew the 6-inch Diatone model and I didn't really see any benefits. I thought, well, maybe we'll get longer flight time or, you know, better performance, more efficiency, but that wasn't really the case. It flew for the same amount of time as a 5-inch and it flew very similar to a 5-inch. I think the only thing that I noticed was that it was a little bit quieter, but there you go. We have I think this is actually a first, so this is a ready to fly, you just have to add your receiver 7-inch model. So let's take a look at the specs. So first of all, I want to talk about the weight because it's different than a 5-inch copter. Obviously it weighs 434 grams without a battery, so that's just as it is here. So you know, it's a heavier model. One thing I will say about the bigger copter though is I do think it is better for the spectator watching line of sight. I think a problem this hobby has, especially at races, is that the 5-inch model, you know, when you're a safe enough distance away from the race that's going on, you just see a load of dots darting around, and you know, we have the X-Class out there, and that's trying to make more of a spectacle. So maybe it's more about that. Maybe it's more about the fact that now we've got the components honed in. Right, let's experiment with this and go bigger and make it more of a spectacle so that people will want to invest in it, you know. So yeah, the specifications, we have got SkyStars branded motors and they seem a very good quality, and they have been in the past as well with SkyStars. They are a 2306 1800 kV. They've got the nice lip on there so that the wire doesn't get in the way. We do have a C-clip rather than a hex screw, and they are not a hollow shaft. That being said, yeah, very nice quality. We've got all 4 screws in here. The propellers are a T7056C, so very high in pitch for a 7-inch. So, you know, this one's really going for the performance, I think. And then the frame, yeah, we have got individual arms. We have got 4mm carbon here. It's very high quality, I have to say. It's chamfered here, and yeah, there's a tiny bit of flex in there, but you know, these arms, with them getting longer, if they don't get thicker, then there's going to be a little bit of flex in there. And the ESCs, they are SkyStars' own. They are 32-bit and 50 amp. They've got some very bright LEDs on there. It looks like we've got some filtering on here as well with some capacitors there. And then for the guts, we have got a Omnibus F4SD flight controller. I actually think it's the same flight controller that was on the STX 225, which bodes well because that was the best flying model out of all of those $100 budget builds. Now you'll notice on this side, well, you might notice, there's a piece of Perspex glass on here covering up the sides, and there was one on this side as well. The only thing is I broke it. So yeah, this sits on there like that, and there's a screw there, and this screw was missing, and I think their idea was to have it sort of lift up like a hood or a bonnet. But what I did was lifted it up to get to the USB here. Can you see there's no access to the USB when this is down? I lifted it up, and because it's Perspex, I put my hand through it and it just snapped off. I did try and glue it, but Yeah, I think these are going to break anyways. Very flimsy. I kept this one on here because I didn't need to access anything, but if you do want to add an SD card, then you're going to have to take that screw out there as well. You know, it's a nice idea because it protects all the electronics, especially this time of year when there's mud all around. But just to let you know, I broke this side off. But yes, so Omnibus F4 SD, and you know, it's got the latest version of Betaflight on there, and it was set up pretty nice, I have to say. The only thing it was missing was air mode, and I think I added in the current meter as well because it's got a current meter. But other than that, I left the on-screen display the same. I put my own rates in there, but everything else was just set up fine. As I say, the only thing I put in there was air mode for some reason. That was missing off, but it's got anti-gravity in there as well, and it's got its own PIDs, which I'm going to fly it on. Now you might be able to see at the back here this unusual device, although you might have seen one before as well. It's a lost model alarm, and it's one that's got a 100 milliamp one cell battery. So when you disconnect the copter from the battery, or if it throws the battery in a crash, then we have got this beeper that goes off, and it is so loud, it's ear piercing inside. So it's one of the larger buzzers there, and I thought that was an interesting touch. It makes me wonder whether the idea of these bigger copters is to go longer range, but I'm not sure about that because, you know, if you say have a fail-safe longer range, you know, and it just drops out of the sky, it's a heavier model to do that. So I'm not too sure about that. And I also think maybe we need GPS if we're going to start going long range, you know, adding Crossfire, the R9 system, and using these heavier models, you know, if we can get the right prop on them. You know, for me, a dual blade with a low pitch would get you longer flight times rather than these sort of, you know, usual 5-inch style propellers but in a 7-inch. But yeah, so with this on the side, it's actually quite tricky to get to. It's got a button on there, and so once you disconnect your battery, you press this button for 5 seconds and then the buzzer stops going off. There's no brand on it, so I thought, is it, you know, full speed, is it the Vifly? But I can't see a brand on it whatsoever, and it is a little bit fiddly getting to the button at the back as well because it's just on this sticky pad. So you press the button, but actually all it does is budges the entire device. You have to press it pretty hard to turn it off there. But yeah, above the flight controller we've got a switching VTX. It's using a MMCX connector. However, it does seem to be directly connected to this Pagoda antenna, and I really don't like the placement of this at all. I don't think we're going to get good video reception. What it needs really is an SMA adapter coming up here perhaps, and then getting above the battery, because as this is a freestyle model, the battery is going to sit on the top there, which is nice, and that means that it's going to block the signal from this Pagoda antenna here. But yeah, it seems like a nice quality one, but just needs switching out, I think. Yeah, it's switchable up to 800 milliwatt as well, and it's using TBS Smart Audio, so you know, it's got all of the latest stuff, and all of that was set up as well. Smart Audio just worked fine. Now we've got an XT60 connector here, and it's actually coming all the way from the back here and out of the top. It's quite convenient. However, there's no low ESR capacitor on there, so I'm expecting a little bit of noise because we've got some capacitors here but nothing on the back there, and there's loads of room for one. I don't know why they didn't include one, so that would be an upgrade for me. There's also no soft mounting on this flight controller. Now, when it was on the STX 225, it didn't need it. However, with this copter, we have got a screw going through the arm of the model, and it's also going through the standoffs. So I really would have liked to have seen some soft mounting going on there. But to be fair, all of these things are an easy fix. It's like a couple of GBP for soft mounts, you know, and then, you know, a couple of GBP for a SMA extension thing. So really they are small things, but they're definitely things that I would change. And then up the front we have got a really decent camera. It is the Runcam 2. It's the full size one. They haven't given you the camera control board with it, but it seems to be set up pretty nice. It has got a 2.3mm lens on it. It isn't really protected though, it does stick out of the front a little bit, but you know, you can change the angle of it there. And you know, as we've got these long arms here, I'm sure you know it's going to be very rare that the camera hits before either the props, the motors, or the arms hit. You're given these 3 grippy battery straps, which are nice. You're also given a silicone mat. As I say, I've been really impressed, and just little touches like this tape around the ESCs and the motor wires to make it really neat as well. They give you some cable ties and also some heat shrink for your antenna. Of course, you have to fit that yourself because it doesn't come with a receiver. I'm just using the XM Plus here. Now, the receiver solders in here, so you do have to take the top off. So we've got the signal, the 5V, and also the ground. It's set up for S-Bus, however, it will just do anything. There's spare UARTs on here, and there's a jumper which is already soldered, so it's a 5V jumper or a 3.3V jumper, and then there's an inversion jumper on there as well. And as I say, it's already set up for S-Bus. So, you know, you're going to have to take this apart if you've got any other receiver, but it's very easy to work on, I should say. So one of the main benefits these days of having a freestyle copter is having this elongated front, and that usually gets the props out of the shot. However, with this one being a 7-inch, the arms are having to be long, and as you can see, they come out further forward. It does look like, though, that the GoPro mount on here is at quite a fair angle, and the props are also see-through, so I think we're going to get a pretty decent image out of this. So I'm going to be sticking a GoPro on here for the flight. You don't get much else in the box. It comes in this big box, which, you know, it doesn't fit in with the props on, which is fine. So yeah, you have to fit the props and the nuts. You get a load of cable ties, and as I say, other stuff that I've already fitted, and you get a spare set of these propellers as well, which is pretty nice. Now, it says that this setup will run a 4 to 6S battery. However, looking at the pitch of these props and the kV of these motors, I would say that you could run 6S on it, but you probably want to go down to a 5-inch prop for that, or at least a very low pitch 6-inch, maybe a low pitch 7-inch. So I'm going to be just flying this one on 4S today, and it's a tricky one knowing what battery size to use. I would say a 1500 up to a 1800. The 1500 just fits on there nicely with a GoPro. So let's go and take it for a fly and see how it performs. Alright, let's line of sight this guy. This is really just to give an idea of what the thing sounds like, and it really does have a presence with it being a larger model. You can see we've got the LEDs on the ESCs there. Those are really bright. Now, because they are a bigger prop, on the lower throttle it isn't loud at all. It is a windy day here today, very windy. Let's see what the punch is like. The punch is pretty intense, actually, but again, not too loud. Yeah, even at this size, it's really getting thrown around by the wind. Let's try acro. Look at that. It flies just like a 5-inch. You know, I'm not seeing any oscillations on the line of sight, and the tune feels okay. Actually pretty nice, the line of sight, because it's bigger, and I think that's actually something this hobby needs as a spectacle. The models get a little bit bigger, then it's more of a spectacle to watch line of sight. we have got falling leaves here at the moment to make sure none of those go through the props. How about that? It'll be interesting to see how it FPVs and what happens to the GoPro footage. Whether we will get loads of props in the shot and whether we will get Giallo, although we have a low exposure day today with it being overcast, so might not show itself. I think it's really interesting how this hobby is progressing. You know, it started off as big copters and then went to 5-inch, went to micro, and now it's going back to these big guys, which I think is fine, just a little bit more tricky to store. And I think, you know, if the idea is to have them long range, I think that's the idea, then I think, you know, with the size and the extra weight, I think we're going to start needing GPS and things like that, just as a safety net. Let's try the audio again, see what it's like, how loud. Not bad at all. Not antisocial. Not got any dogs barking at me. Feels like it's got so much power as well. I'm not sure it's quite as much power as a 5-inch. Oh, by the way, this beeper is so loud. That's a good thing. Let's try the punch again. Yeah, there's a sort of a delay as the props spool up and then it accelerates. Kind of reminds me of a 5-inch that has got stator motors that are a little bit too small. And these motors, they do look kind of small now for the size of model. So perhaps there's a lack of torque there. Now we are running these big props. But so far so good. And when I go back into angle mode, I'm not seeing any drift. So it doesn't look like there's too much noise around. So all that's left to do is to fly it FPV. Alrighty, let's take a look at some flight footage, and it became clear straight away that it was much windier than I thought it was. And when I had a look on the internet, it said gusts up to 20 mph winds today, and I can well believe that, because it felt like the copter wasn't flying smooth, like it was a little bit jittery. But I think that was down to the wind, and I think this is going to be the thing with these bigger models. If you've got a bigger prop surface area, then it's a bigger area for it to interact with the wind on a windy day. So yeah, I was noticing it getting knocked around just a little bit, and it wasn't completely smooth. However, I do think that that is just down to the weather. What I would say though is, just to be sure, if you are interested in getting this, I would get yourself a couple of soft mounts, because there might be a bit of vibration coming through from those motors, but with the arms being long, I'd be surprised at that really. And you know, in general it felt pretty nice. I couldn't hear any oscillations whilst I was doing the line of sight or while I was doing FPV. It's just something that showed itself through the DVR, but also the GoPro as well. So talking about the DVR feed, I was actually surprised how clean it was, considering there's no low ESR capacitor, which is pretty impressive actually. There was quite a lot of breakup, as I expected, because of that antenna placement, but again, that's an easy fix. So I think in general this is a pretty good model, and if we just look at the current meter here, it was sort of accelerating. Did you see there? It took some time to get to the max amps, which was only 80 amps in total. So really the 50 amp ESCs are a bit of an overkill. And I think the reason why we're not going over 80 amps is probably the motors. Actually thinking about it, there's probably not enough torque in them to get all of those max amps from the ESCs. So, you know, maybe you could go 6S on this and maybe get them spooling up higher. When I landed, the motors weren't warm at all, but it definitely felt like perhaps they were a bottleneck, or maybe, as I say, it could do with a 6S. But yeah, for the first flight, I didn't want to go 6S. You see there, just some lines on the VTX. Yeah, so for me, this one, yeah, it's pretty nice out of the box, but I would definitely go soft mounts on the flight controller. I would add a low ESR capacitor, and I'd do something about that antenna. Those are all small things for me, but really I think they need doing. So if you are interested in this model, I think it needs a little bit of fixing to do, but for the price I think it's great. And you know, if we look at their GoPro footage as well, you know, we're only just getting the props in the shot because of that high angle on the camera, and you know, they are transparent props as well, so you can't really see them. Not seeing any jello on the picture at all. I do think that if the sun came out you might see it a little bit, and to me I think that's why copters went down to 5-inch, because the bigger propellers produce lower frequency vibrations, so CMOS cameras are more susceptible to that, and you get more jello. And a 5-inch, because it's revving higher with the smaller props, you get higher frequency vibrations, and that doesn't show through to the camera. But yeah, actually really surprised with this setup. It flew fantastic. Just the stock PIDs here, but as you can see, flight time not any better than a 5-inch. You probably have to go down to a dual blade and a lower pitch prop for that, but I'll link it in the below if you wish to get one. And as always, thanks so much for watching. Please continue to subscribe. Cheers.